Museums are interesting and fun places to visit, filled with educational artifacts from all over the world. Welcome back to another episode of Remnant Stew. I'm Leah.
I'm Phil.
And I'm Steve. If you're a person who finds traditional museums stuffy and boring, we got a show for you. This is Season 5, Episode 16, Strange Museums.
If you have an appetite for the strange and bizarre, then pull up a chair and grab a spoon for another intriguing serving of Remnant Stew. Remnant Stew is gluten-free, organic, made from all natural, free-range ingredients, and guaranteed to provide the recommended daily serving of curiosity.
Well, you might remember our episode earlier this year titled, This Spud's for You. This was our enthusiastic homage to all things potato.
I need some French fries.
Yeah, right?
The idea behind this episode emerged from a visit to the Canadian Potato Museum in Prince Edward Island, Canada. We went into a good amount of detail about this quirky and fun museum. Well, today we're going to explore some more strange museums with bizarre exhibits. So stay with the guide now. We don't want you getting lost. Oh, and here's a little teaser. We're kind of saving our favorite to the end.
Find your buddy.
You know, we
Get
we should have done more episodes involving food because he brought us potatoes.
This is true.
And it wasn't the only time. He brought us other food when we did it. Okay, so next time we're going to do like cakes or something.
Right?
Right.
Anyway, as you likely know, the city of Berkeley, California is a well-established center of countercultural influences. It's the home to University of California, which is the site of many political protests in the 1960s. It also became the focal point of the hippie movement of that era. And of course, the psychedelic drug culture was a prominent feature of that time. So it might not surprise you to find a weird museum in Berkeley.
No.
However, but the type of weird museum may surprise you. No, it's not a collection of love beads, drug paraphernalia, or even neighborhood jackets.
Yeah.
Berkeley is the proud home of the world's only wingnut museum.
I'm sorry, what?
Like in Nuts and Bolts?
Wingnut, nuts and bolts. That's right.
Nice.
Nice.
In 2022, an employee, so it's a pretty new museum,
Yeah.
an employee of a department store called Urban One was tasked with cleaning up the store's hardware department. His name is Nico, and he stated, quote, "It was very messy, cluttered, and disorganized. He kept coming across different types of wingnuts and decided to set them aside. The more he cleaned, the larger his collection grew. Soon, other employees were contributing to the collection, and then even customers were making donations of unusual wingnuts of their own." Now, the wingnut was first invented in the first half of the 19th century and quickly became an indispensable part of, or piece of hardware.
It is an awesome piece of
Yeah.
art.
It is. It lets users fasten bolts by hand without using tools, but using little wings jutting out from the nut. So over the past 200 years, the term wingnut has also been used as slang term for mentally unsound people,
I have no idea what you're talking about.
political and extremists,
Oh, these are wingnuts.
freaks, eccentrics, and weirdos. But in the Bay Area, it also became used to describe an intellectually creative thinker.
Oh,
Yeah.
wingnut.
Okay,
That's
so
a
you-
compliment.
So
Okay.
yeah,
You
it's a
can fly
compliment.
both directions. Got
Yeah.
it.
So back to Nico, who started the collection. Over the next several months, his assortment of unusual wingnuts had grown so large that he decided to put them on display. According to Atlas Obscura, quote, "In the museum, you'll find a majestic display."
Majestic.
Majestic
That's an
display of
awesome term.
wingnuts in all shapes, sizes, and materials from various hardware applications. Some highlights include the large decorative wingnuts from the front wheels of 1940 bicycles.
Wow, what's that?
Nice. So if you're being so are they being sponsored like by Home Depot or what?
No. They're their own place.
But for Nico and his
Ace Hardware.
associates, the wingnut took on a stronger significance. When the store employees decided to form a union, they selected the wingnut as their logo. Quote, "Ultimately, we decided on the wingnut because we thought it represented us as people and represented our clientele, and it seemed like a powerful symbol," said Nico.
Okay.
The Berkeley Wingnut Museum is open Saturdays and Sundays from 1 to 5 p.m.
All right.
Road trip.
On your to-do list. That's a pretty
awesome.
good one. Well, now back in our Season 4, Episode 5 called Psych, we touched on several unique psychological disorders. Among these we discussed in that episode was something called Stendhal syndrome, and this was named for a French author who described in detail his experience after an 1817 trip to Florence, Italy. In fact, Stendhal syndrome is also called Florence syndrome. You're probably aware that Florence, Italy is home to some of the world's most amazing and beautiful art galleries. However, sometimes exposure to excessive amounts of beautiful artwork can cause some people to experience rapid heartbeat, anxiety, confusion, dizziness, and even hallucinations. That is Stendhal syndrome. And I actually mentioned in that episode that I had kind of a brief touch of this. I would call it a mild version of it when I was in Florence about 9 years ago while touring the Uffizi Gallery. I just remember feeling like I was stimulation overload, and I had to go to a window to look outside and not look at beautiful art for a while. Well, there's little danger of experiencing Stendhal syndrome if you decide to take a trip to Boston and visit the Museum of Bad Art.
I want to know how you get picked for this.
Right?
According to the website, museumofbadart.org, the Museum of Bad Art, or MOBA for short, is the world's only museum dedicated to the collection, exhibition, and celebration of art in all of its forms that would not be welcome in any traditional art museum.
Oh, okay.
Quote, our collection includes sincere art in which something has gone wrong in a way that results in compelling, interesting images.
We sincerely messed this up. Yeah. Let's display it anyway.
There are 800 permanent pieces in MOBA's collection, though only 50 are on display at any one time. That way you can go back next month and maybe see some different bad art. Each piece embodies plenty of portraits, as they call it, P-O-O-R-T-R-A-I-T. See what they did there? Portraits.
Yeah, that was very well. That was very well done.
Very clever.
Yeah, very good.
And they have they've been either donated, thrift, or even rescued from the trash. From undistinguishable presidents and celebrities to disconcerting landscapes and anthropomorphic animals, each piece carries a story and a laugh. That's from the Discoverer.com.
Nice.
An article in Time.com states, quote, as you stroll through MOBA, you'll grow more and more confident in your own artistic abilities. All the pieces range from the works of talented artists that have gone awry to works of exuberant but crude artists who barely in control of the brush. Now, many might find the location of MOBA to be a plus,
hung up there.
Yeah.
as it's housed inside the Dorchester Brewing Company, so you can enjoy a pint while discussing the bizarre art with your friends. It might add to the pleasure of the experience. The MOBA is open daily and admission is free.
Nice. The price is right.
Yeah,
That makes me think, have you ever seen on the internet or whatever, bad taxidermy? Especially like from the Middle Ages or whatever, where they had no idea what a lion looked like or whatever. Okay, anyway. You might recall our season 3 episodes 8 and 9, which were entitled American Monsters and Monsters of the World.
I love those episodes.
Yeah,
Why does
some of
it
my
come
favorite.
out like a bear?
Yeah.
In these episodes, we discussed the animals and creatures that dwell in, well, if not the actual lands of the world, at least within the legends and lore of native people. Of course, these include the various cryptids such as Sasquatch or Bigfoot, the Chupacabra, and the Yeti.
Yeah,
The name-
prefer Yeti.
The name for the study of these mythical creatures is cryptozoology. And yes, there's a museum dedicated to this
Of
that
course
I
there is.
really want to go to.
Yeah.
Located in Portland, Maine, the International Cryptozoology Museum.
International.
Well,
right.
it claims to be the only
Nice.
museum of the world in the world of this type.
All right. Okay.
So, quoting directly from their website, cryptozoology.com, quote, we have a wide range of exhibitions from rare, one-of-a-kind scientific, zoological specimens to popular cultural homages to the relevant anthropological and psychological acknowledgments of the sightings and folk traditions to be found within hominology and cryptozoology.
Oh, wow.
They're a little wordy.
It's a little wordy.
Evidently, cryptozoologies are masters of the Renaissance. Founded in 2003.
No offense, guys, but if you're looking to sponsor a podcast.
And that would be perfect.
I know.
That would be perfect. Founded in 2003, the Cryptozoology Museum claims to have thousands of items on exhibit.
Yeah.
One exhibit includes a letter from the actor Jimmy Stewart detailing his role in the Pangbosh Yeti hand mystery.
Oh.
This is
Pangbosh Yeti hand mystery. Oh,
Yeah,
that's
this is
fascinating.
in reference to an incident in 1957 when a Texas oil man named Tom Slick which is great. Oil man name. Negotiated to buy a supposed Yeti hand from some Nepalese. How do you say that?
Nepalese.
Yeah, monks from Nepal.
Yeah.
Jimmy Stewart then agreed to sneak the Yeti hand out of the country by wrapping it in his wife's underwear and stowing it in her suitcase. I don't know. Well, it doesn't say whether she was aware.
Gloria agreed to put it in her suitcase.
Slick and his team also claimed to have found some Yeti poop, which is also on display.
Of course it is.
Some other items on exhibit are actual hair samples of abominable snowmen and Bigfoot. Their website claims that the museum is the result of more than 5 decades of field research, travel, and dedication to gathering representative materials, native art, foot casts, hair samples, models, and other cryptozoological samples.
Absolutely awesome.
In another impressively long sentence, they also claim... Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
You ready?
Hold your breath, folks.
Quote,
Here we go.
realizing that cryptozoology is a gateway science for many for many young people's future interest in biology, zoology, wildlife studies, paleontology, anthropology, ecology, marine sciences, and conservation, the International Cryptozoology Museum is filling a needed educational, scientific, and natural history niche in learning.
That opened a
quite
door.
a sentence there.
You get the feeling that these people take themselves seriously.
They're giggling as
just
they
like
typed that out.
gateway science. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, gotta
building the bridge.
stay away from that. You go there, then you're going to be off into all kind of other sciences.
You get to experience them all in
gateway
But I
Under
love
one
it.
roof.
I love it. Evidently, business is booming at the International Cryptozoology Museum, as next year in 2025, they are moving to an expanded facility in Bangor, Maine.
Oh, Bangor, Maine.
The museum is open every day of the year, with the exception of Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's Day.
All right.
Awesome.
Sounds like an interesting one.
Bangor, Maine.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, now, Lee, you might remember when you first came over to my house and talked to me about coming onto this podcast. I said, I won't do anything that has bad language in it because I want my students to be able to listen to
right?
that.
And he bribed his students for years with
Yes, he did.
From the beginning of Remnant Stew, we have strived to keep our format clean and family friendly. This has not changed one bit. However, there is a person's name in this story that uncomfortably borders on the cusp of acceptability. I just wanted to have a little bit forewarning before we jump into it. Now, I doubt if very many are familiar with this man's name, but it's likely that all of our listeners have tasted his invention. Are you ready for his name? Okay, here, I'm going to spell it first. It's Momofuku. Momofuku. And his last name is Ando. And while you may not have heard his name, I'll bet that you're all familiar with his invention. He is the creator of ramen noodles.
Oh, yeah.
And every college student goes, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And all of those that were,
that are supporting college students.
Supporting
right?
college. Yeah, you need them when you get them.
And why do we bring that up? Well, his work and his invention are celebrated in the Cup Noodle Museum of Osaka, Japan.
That's awesome. It's got its own museum.
You see, it was in Osaka in 1958 where Momofuku Ando toiled in a work shed behind his house to develop a ramen that can be quickly prepared at home by just adding hot water.
Yep. It's
Quoting
quick.
from their website, and this is their website name, cupnoodles-museum.jp, quote, he worked alone, sleeping only 4 hours a night, and without a day off for an entire year. Chicken ramen, the product of many trial and error experiments, was dubbed, quote, magic ramen, and became an instant popular sensation. The Cup Noodle Museum even contains a complete reproduction of his original work shed. But don't think that Momofuku Ando sat back and rested on his noodles. No siree. In 1971, he visited America where he saw supermarket managers breaking up the ramen noodles, putting them in a cup, pouring hot water on them, and eating them with a fork. He hastened back to his Osaka workshop and began working on the cup noodles concept. Quote, by bringing together all sorts of wisdom and innovative ideas, cup noodles transform instant ramen into a global food. The Cup Noodle Museum is very much a hands-on affair. There's an area where you can enjoy the entire process of kneading, spreading, steaming, and seasoning the wheat flour and drying it with flash fry method. You can also design your own cup and experiment with different flavors. You can stroll through the Instant Noodle Tunnel, which displays over 800 varieties of ramen noodles that are sold throughout the world. The Instant Noodle Tunnel, that sounds pretty exciting. And this personally would be my personal favorite. You can visit the Cup Noodle Drama Theater, which is shaped like a giant cup of noodles.
Bring your craziness right here.
And in the theater, you will enjoy a dynamic video presentation of Momofuku Ando and his amazing determination and creative spark. Of course, there is also a tasting room and a gift shop.
Of course.
Now back to Momofuku Ando. Once again, he wasn't just satisfied to bring ramen noodles to the world. In 2006, just a few years before his death, he invented space ramen.
Oh, wow.
With space ramen, Momofuku's creative thinking transcends the bounds of Earth to contribute to creating food that people can eat even in space. The Cup Noodle Museum in Osaka is open every day except Tuesday.
It's probably better food in space than eating through a toothpaste container.
True.
And, you could get 4 of them for $1 when I was in college.
Right.
So, that would feed you for a little bit.
I wonder if they host a lot of weddings.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, one of our inspirations is Robert Ripley, and we even did an episode on him back in season 1, way back in season 1.
Yeah.
Episode 9, called Believe It or Not, where we honored him. And based on the success of his Believe It or Not items, which appeared in newspapers around the world, the Ripley Company decided to open a museum to honor some of the subjects of their articles.
Right.
Dubbed the Auditorium. ODD, Auditorium. The first one was opened at the Chicago's World Fair in 1933. There now are dozens of auditoriums located across 10 different countries, and they host millions of visitors each year. Robert Ripley expanded the world-famous Believe It or Not brand into radio, television, movies, books, licensing, and auditoriums. A genuine empire of the weird, the bizarre, and unbelievable. Now, according to their website, RipleyEntertainment.com, typically, there are 300 to 500 exhibits in an auditorium, collected from around the world and covering a wide variety of areas: science and biology, history and culture, technology, illusions, art, sports, and Robert Ripley artifacts.
And they're all different. They're not the same.
Right. Each place has different stuff.
Yeah.
That's right. Each auditorium is unique in its architecture and its collection of oddities and their presentation. This is a careful balance between the strange, the shocking, and the beautiful.
Yeah.
And we went to, I believe it was in San Antonio on a family vacation once, and took the kids to Robert Ripley Museum. And it's funny because Tori, I think she was like 7 years old or something, and it freaked her out because it is a little. It's a little scary.
There's a lot of strange stuff.
It's got like a freak show kind of
Right.
vibe to it. So a few years ago, when she's like maybe 15, I think, she and I went on just a trip, just ourselves, us girls. And so as we were headed out to town towards Austin, in the Austin area, she goes, "Do you remember that time we went to the museum? Robert Ripley Museum?" I said, "Yeah." And it freaked you out? She goes, "I know. It was so weird and scary. I wonder if there's one on our way."
We'll just see it again.
And there wasn't one, but I definitely cultivated a sense of weirdness in her. But we did find a museum in Austin, the Museum of the Weird, and it was very much like Robert Ripley's Believe It or Not.
Right.
And so we did go to that, and it was sufficiently freaky.
Okay. Well, now the as a history teacher, I was kind of not expecting there to be really a whole lot of historical items in the auditorium, but in that one in San Antonio, though, I was surprised to find the car. They have on display the car that Lee Harvey Oswald rode to work in on the day that he assassinated John F. Kennedy. The car actually belonged to his neighbor that he would commute back and forth with this neighbor when he worked in the Texas School Book Depository. But so you got this kind of odd, but then this very important historic item
just sitting there.
Right.
They sit right in the middle of it. So there are important historical things there.
And I think Robert Ripley, in his odd, weird way, brought a lot of culture, a lot of knowledge of different cultures to the mainstream America.
Absolutely, he did. And if you I went back and listened to that episode the other day about Robert Ripley, and it's one of our better ones. I think one of our more interesting ones.
And now for something completely off topic and off kilter. Brace yourself for the oddity du jour.
When I say the term Banana Republic, what comes to mind?
Clothing store.
Florida?
Yeah, well, the term has become somewhat muddled by the clothing producer, but Banana Republic used to be a derogatory term. Buckle up, because the origins of that term will take us on a long and very bumpy ride.
Okay.
Okay.
After its introduction at the 1876 World's Fair in Philadelphia, the banana became extremely popular. It became the picture of tropical paradises for most people, and the resulting demand for the fruit meant that the banana companies sought to lower costs and increase output immediately. Enter the UFC. No, not the Ultimate Fighting Championship, but the United Fruit Company. Through their large...
we talked about them once before.
Oh, did we?
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you're looking for a podcast to sponsor.
Yeah. Through their large production abilities and their tight control of labor and transportation, the UFC was able to provide the American people with what they wanted, bananas that were ripe and cheap. The UFC grew rapidly as a company and ultimately became known as El Pulpo, the octopus. Due to its ubiquitous nature, it had connections everywhere, from telecommunication companies to the governments of the countries where it operated. In 1954, El Pulpo showed just how powerful it had become when the president of Guatemala attempted to limit the UFC's control on the country. You see, the UFC owned huge amounts of Guatemala's land, and the president wanted to take these lands back through government bonds so that it could be distributed back amongst the Guatemalans.
Okay, now I remember where we talked about them before in Guatemala, where the UFC, the United Fruit Company, found all those giant spheres. They were
Oh, that's right.
Oh, right.
That's right.
The giants, somewhere like 6 feet long, just big round spheres that were hundreds of years old, and nobody knows anything about them.
Of all different sizes and
Well,
everything.
it comes full globe.
Yeah, right.
Oh.
Sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Yeah, he was rolling on that one.
Well, the UFC didn't like that, the government seizure of their land, so they engineered a coup with the aid of the United States that led to a 30-year military dictatorship and civil war with hundreds of thousands of deaths.
Ugh.
That's bananas. Furthermore, the aforementioned tight control of labor that the UFC had on its foreign workers led to some abysmal working conditions and low wages, along with long hours and little care for work-related accidents. This is where the term Banana Republic began to form. If you were a small nation that had a singular primary export that was largely controlled by foreign companies, you were a Banana Republic.
Interesting.
The United Fruit Company still exists to this day and could sponsor us, despite its bloody and immoral history. Chiquita is the name the former UFC trades under today, and I'm certain that a large portion of our listeners have eaten a Chiquita banana, as I'm sure most of us here in the studio have. As well.
Yeah.
I remember
for sure.
they used to have some great commercials back in the day.
Oh, yeah. Chiquita. On a small side note, the banana flavor that is in our confectionaries fell victim to the UFC as well. This going off script here. Have any of y'all had banana candy and wondered why it doesn't really taste like
it doesn't
banana?
taste anything. It doesn't have any banana in it whatsoever.
Right. Well, the strain of banana that we'll get to that point, but the strain of banana that the flavoring hoped to mimic was eradicated in the midst of the UFC's claim to power.
Interesting.
Yeah. So as Mom was saying, there's no actual banana in that flavoring. Also, chemically, they found a chemical that was very close to this specific banana's flavor that I'm talking about. But it was eradicated as the banana that it's based on was harder to transport and was taken out of the farms that the UFC acquired. Eventually, the Gros Michel, GROSMICHEL, banana fell out of production and is nearly extinct. I got my info from, if I can flip the page here, ScienceFriday.com. I relied heavily on Harvard EDU, Britannica.com, and TheCollector.com.
Interesting. And
cool.
we did talk about in one of the episodes how bananas are radioactive.
Yeah.
Right.
What kind of radiation is it? Do you know? Is it what's in them? Cesium?
I don't remember now.
Yeah. The Banana Republic song.
I want to sing the Chiquita Banana song. I'm Chiquita Banana, and I'm here to say I'm the top banana in the world today.
At that time, they were probably the only banana in the world.
Well, on to another topic here. I once knew a fellow who was featured as a keynote speaker for various conventions and conferences. He told me that one of his favorite questions that he liked to ask an audience was, quote, "Please raise your hand if you have ever lived in a home that did not have indoor plumbing." He said that even in the poshest dinner parties, there would almost always be a couple of people who would admit to having lived in such humble circumstances at some point in their lives. What about either of you? You ever lived in a home without indoor
No,
plumbing?
never. But I have visited a family member
Right.
that lived in a home. Well, now that I think about it, they didn't have electricity. This was my great-grandfather, but I think he had indoor plumbing.
Okay.
Now that I think about it.
Actually, when I met my first wife, her family was living in a house in the woods that her father was building. They were living in it while he was building it. It was shelled in, but it wasn't completed on the inside. They had electricity and they had a well to draw water, but it still took several months before the restroom facility was moved indoors. They actually did use an outhouse.
Yeah.
Now, on the other hand, growing up where I lived, my father was the manager of the sewage treatment facility in my hometown. So, we had opposite backgrounds, but we had a great marriage until she passed away. Anyway, I digress. I, for one, am a big fan of indoor plumbing. How about you? Can we all get on
Yes.
board
I
with
mean,
this?
is there anybody
Yeah.
that would say no?
And if you're with me, then you might enjoy a trip to the Sulabh International Toilet Museum in New Delhi, India.
Nice.
At this whimsical museum, you will learn about the history of toilets for the past 4,500 years, stretching from simple chamber pots to elaborately decorated Victorian toilet seats. Established in 1992 by the esteemed social reformer Dr. Bindeshwar Pathak, founder of the Sulabh sanitation movement, the Sulabh International Museum of Toilets offers a unique glimpse into the history of sanitation. The museum states that the oldest known use of toilets is traced to a settlement called Harappan in 2500 BC. Harappan is located in what is now Pakistan. Excavations there show remnants of wells, bathing tanks, both above ground and underground drains, toilets, soak pits, roads, and lanes. The museum also displays sanitation arrangements from other ancient civilizations, including Egypt, Babylon, Crete, Jerusalem, Greece, and Rome. These ancient toilets often incorporated communal seating arrangements on stone slabs that had round holes chiseled into them. Flowing water was channeled underneath the holes to carry waste away from the urban areas. During medieval times, rulers generally lived in castles or fortresses for their own protection. It would be silly, though, to have Her Majesty beating a hasty retreat to an outhouse. So in many cases, highly decorated chamber pots were brought into the bedchamber for the royalty to use. A servant known as the groom of the stool would be in charge of emptying the contents.
There's worse names than that. And that could be had.
In fact, there was a special piece of furniture known as a close stool or a cross stool, which functioned as a sort of potty chair in which the chamber pot was placed. The museum has on display the diamond-studded toilet seat that belonged to Queen Victoria, as well as several highly decorated toilets from other parts of Europe. Now, some castles in the Middle Ages did have built-in toilets of a fashion. They might have been a seat over a shaft that sent the contents of the colon into a heap at the bottom, or in rarer cases, into a water system that carried it away. In other castles, the shaft led directly to an opening in the upper wall, and stains from medieval royal poop can still be seen on the outside of some castles and fortifications today.
He's getting a little fancy in the writing.
The museum also contains a modern section, including a demonstration of a toilet used in space. It also includes toilet cartoons, toilet jokes, and a collection of toilets from around the world. A highlight of the modern section is a collection of ultra-modern electric toilets from Japan and South Korea. Ooh, I was in South Korea. Let me just tell you, yeah, that's quite an experience. While all of this is in good fun, the museum actually does have a serious side as well. Dr. Bindeshwar Pathak, mentioned earlier, founder of the Sulabh sanitation movement, is a leader in the effort to bring clean water and improve sanitation to all citizens of the world. It's estimated that some 600 million people, which is about 8% of the world's population, do not have access to toilets
That's true.
or clean drinking water.
Right.
Of course, this can be the root cause of disease and deaths in many countries. The Sulabh Sanitation Museum is dedicated to reaching and assisting these impacted people.
I think that we mentioned this museum in an oddity way back.
Yeah, I think so.
And one of the things on display there that I loved was a traveling toilet that you would take with you, like on a wagon train or
Oh,
whatever. And it looks just like a steamer trunk. And so
Don't
they
wanna
would
get 'em
pull it
mixed
off.
up.
Yeah. And
Right.
so, but the idea was if they were robbed,
Give them that one.
you give them that one and they get away.
That's a great idea.
Yes.
This is
So
where all the money is.
I loved it.
It's got the weight, remember?
Well, now you might recall our season 2, episode 23 called Curiously Interred, one of my favorites.
That's a good
Mm-hmm.
As the episode where we put the fun in funeral.
Absolutely.
We brought you
It's a
interesting
funeral.
stories from around the world about how people go through the death, burial, and mourning process. For example, in Taiwan, they hire exotic dancers to liven up the proceedings.
Lively funeral. They actually dance on top of the casket sometimes. Yeah.
In Madagascar, they dig up their dead once a year and have a party with them. And then they did. And then there was the woman in San Antonio who was buried in her Ferrari.
Right.
And if you like these stories, you would most likely also enjoy a visit to the National Museum of Funeral History located here in Houston, Texas.
Of course.
Yeah.
Just down the road. According to their website, nmfh.org, the mission statement of the museum, the National Museum of Funeral History, is as follows, quote, honoring the compassion and dedication of the funeral services industry has been the museum's mission since it began in 1992. Today, the museum continues to enlighten visitors on one of man's oldest cultural rituals and celebrate the heritage of funeral services industry. The museum claims to contain America's largest collection of authentic historical funeral service items in 19 permanent exhibits. Here you will learn about hearses throughout history, caskets and coffins, plus the funerals of presidents, popes, and celebrities, and the history of embalming and cremation.
Ooh, that sounds fun.
In their presidential section, the museum contains Abraham Lincoln's death mask, as well as the original bill totaling $99.25 for George Washington's funeral expenses.
Wow.
There was also items from the funerals of President John F. Kennedy and Dwight D. Eisenhower, as well as a special section dedicated to the funeral of longtime Houston resident, President George H.W. Bush.
All right. Oh, yeah, I remember
Right.
the train. Yeah.
There's a special section on 19th century mourning, which was strongly influenced by Queen Victoria after the death of her husband, or her beloved, Prince Albert. You may recall that she wore black for the rest of her life.
Yeah.
Wearing black became symbolic of a period of mourning. A related section includes a display of post-mortem photography. This was a popular fad in the late 19th century.
Mm-hmm.
It was a common practice for the family members to prop up their deceased loved ones and gather around for a photograph because photography, well, it was expensive.
Oh, absolutely.
It was expensive. So
Might
it
be
wasn't
the only
something,
picture you ever had of the person.
Exactly. So it wasn't something that they did as family portraits or
Right,
whatever. And so as one last effort to
Yeah.
remember the deceased, they would do that. And a lot of the times, if they posed with the deceased person, you could tell which one's deceased because it took so long for the exposure to happen. Everyone is kind of a little blurry except for the person that's dead.
Right.
Anyway, visitors to the museum often comment about the amazing collection of hearses, both modern and horse-drawn. Quote, the craftsmanship of the old carriages was amazing, wrote a visitor from Illinois. Quote, they have the hearse that was used in President Reagan's funeral. A visitor from the local area wrote, we really enjoyed the different displays of coffins from around the globe. Also enjoyed the section about New Orleans jazz funerals.
Right.
That's interesting,
New Orleans
yeah.
has its own culture. Like it's a
Absolutely.
city that has the culture of an entire
Right.
country. And a visitor from New York wrote, if you're interested in learning new things or enjoying the macabre, this is the place for you. The National Museum of Funeral History is located in an out-of-the-way section of Houston in what looks like an ordinary plain building, but the funeral fun begins as soon as you walk through the doors. It's open daily. And I've been there. It's really interesting.
What was your
That's
favorite
cool.
part of it?
The hearses,
Yeah.
the horse-drawn hearses, and how elaborate Victorian mourning was. But one of the things that stuck with me is the Japanese, and I don't remember what the name of it is, but the Japanese ritual where when they're cremated, bones aren't all. Now, in America, if you're cremated, then they take the bones that kind of survived and they crush them up. So
Right.
it remains
Powder.
ash. But in Japan, the family goes through the ashes and with chopsticks picks out the bone pieces. And they figure out, okay, so when they put you in the urn, they put the bones in the urn in the order of
Well, where your legs
of
were.
where
and
your
then-
the legs
you're
and feet go.
to make it look like you're standing up.
Yeah, make sure you're standing upright.
Interesting.
So, and it's interesting the amount of education that you have to know what bones.
What bones are where?
Right.
Yeah.
So, anyway, so
Wow.
very interesting museum if you're spooky like me.
Well, we don't have time to write about all the weird museums that we discovered. But before we get to our last and favorite museum, we want to briefly touch on some of the quirky museums that deserve honorable mention. In Bordeaux, France, you will find the La Cité des Vins, one of the world's largest wine museums. Here you will learn about winemaking from antiquity into the modern era, and an example of duck architecture from our last episode about word architecture. The museum is shaped like a giant red wine decanter. Kind of fun.
No, that's kind
Yeah.
of cool. Yeah.
Then in the Netherlands, you don't want to miss the Amsterdam Cheese Museum. From vintage Gouda to award-winning goat cheese.
Yeah, you know
They
it's
couldn't-
stinky.
They couldn't open up that one in France?
This
Right next to
museum
the giant-
specializes in edible exhibits and is best visited on an empty stomach. Learn from one of the museum's cheese guides about the history of Dutch cheese making. You'll definitely want to eat them up. Good. Then the Museum of Ice Cream has 6 different locations in the United States as well as one in Singapore. The museum, that's kind of an odd combination there.
We got them everywhere in the States and in Singapore.
The museum is characterized by brightly colored rooms, each with a delicious theme. Indulge your sweet tooth with exhibits like a massive sprinkle pool, a candy garden, and a Pop Rocks cave. Each new room will make you feel like you're Willy Wonka.
Wait, a sprinkle pool? Like, do you get to get in it?
I guess.
Like a
yeah.
ball pit kind of thing? That would be
It
awesome.
gets everywhere.
Now, this museum is weird not only for its theme, but also its location. Situated in a cave in the small town of Avanos, Turkey, is the Avanos Hair Museum. It features a
cave?
huge collection of hair gathered from more than 16,000 women. We don't know why. In Tokyo, you will find the Meguro Parasitological Museum. According to an article from Time.com, at this museum you can learn of everything you've ever wanted to know about tapeworms, head lice, and plenty of other parasites you've probably never heard of. The collection boasts some 300 specimens, including a 29-foot-long tapeworm. Not recommended for anyone with a weak stomach.
And like most museums, you have to exit through the gift shop.
Probably. And finally, back in the middle of the United
Don't
States,
tell
we
me what it
find the
was shaped
Kansas Barbed Wire Museum, located in La Crosse, Kansas.
Now
And
that's
yes, there really is an
fascinating.
entire museum dedicated to barbed wire. It features more than 2,400 varieties and explains the role barbed wire played in the settlement of the United States. And I've actually known several people who were enthusiastic barbed wire collectors. here in
That's because
Texas.
we're in Texas, and Texas was absolutely Texas history and barbed wire go hand in hand.
Everywhere.
That's right.
Well, now finally on to our last one. One of my grandsons is entering junior high school this year, and when he went to tour the campus, he was held speechless when a cheerleader smiled at him and asked him if he needed help finding his way around.
That's why they do that.
As my daughter was telling me about this, we discussed the inevitable heartbreak that comes with dating and then breaking up. Almost everyone has been there and can identify with the pain of a broken relationship. Well, there is a museum in Zagreb, Croatia, that perhaps celebrates, isn't maybe the right word, but at least honors the nearly universal experience of a breakup. The Museum of Broken Relationships is for anyone who has felt love's cruel sting. The exhibits include donated personal objects from former lovers, often accompanied by a story about their failed relationship.
Right?
Some of the exhibits really are heartbreaking, but others are downright hilarious. And here are a few of our favorites. Now, we're going to stay. I will tell you about a heartbreaking one real quickly. There was a postcard there. A lady from Armenia said that she was given this postcard by a boy, saying that he liked her, wanted to marry her, but then when the families got together, her parents told his parents that their boy wasn't good enough for her, and then he died tragically the next day, and it was thought that he killed himself. So that's kind of an example of the side, and there are of the sad exhibits that are there. But we don't want to bring you all down by too much of that. So let's talk about some of the more maybe humorous ones. This first one is called the X-Axe, A gentleman in Berlin writes that his girlfriend had been living with him for several months when he had an opportunity to travel for 3 weeks to the United States. Quote, at the airport, we said goodbye in tears, and she was assuring me that she could never survive 3 weeks without me. I returned after 3 weeks, and she said, I fell in love with somebody else who I met 4 days ago. She went on a 2-week holiday with her new lover while her furniture stayed with me. I was so angry that I bought an axe at a hardware store, and every day she was gone, I smashed one piece of her furniture. The more I chopped, the better I felt. 2 weeks later, when she returned, I had all of her broken furniture arranged for her in neat little piles of kindling. She took the trash and left my apartment for good. The axe was now promoted to a therapy instrument.
That's so wrong. A woman in Taiwan writes, quote, I had an almost feverish imagination about what kind of boy I would fall in love with, and even listed all the criteria. He should, number 1, be tall. Number 2, be tanned. 3, play music. 4, love post-rock. 5, especially love explosions in the sky. 6, be able to cook, hopefully. And I met him. He satisfied all the criteria I had listed above, even the 6th. And as luck would have it, this boy, my Prince Charming, also fell in love with me. We started our whirlwind romance. Like any girl in love, I felt like the luckiest girl in the world. This passionate love lasted about 6 months. One day, I suddenly realized that a criteria-fulfilling boy might not necessarily be a considerate and tolerant lover. He might not understand you. He even gave me a Galileo thermometer, wrapped in a crushed paper box as my birthday present. What? Who would do that? So we broke up. From that day on, I have never made another list.
So the Galileo thermometer's in the museum now.
And I would love, I have a Galileo thermometer. They're really kind of cool. And
But
that's
it
a cool
wasn't
gift.
what
Good
she
job,
wanted,
Paul.
though.
Yeah. And I guess that just wasn't her thing.
I think that's a really good point. You have all this idea in mind, this person, they're going to be this, and then you meet them and, ooh, wait a minute, there's other things I didn't think about.
Right. And then another woman, this one from Paris, writes, quote, for a long time, he loved the coffee I made for him using the espresso machine he gave me. For a long time, he loved me. And then one day, he no longer loved the coffee I made for him using the espresso machine he gave me. And then one day, he no longer loved me and left. And so I took the espresso machine he gave me that made the coffee he loved, and I put it in the basement so I don't have to look at it anymore. But every time I come down to the basement, there it is. So now it sits in the museum.
Donation.
Now that is an expensive gift,
Yeah.
an
It
espresso
is.
machine.
Now, this one's kind of interesting. A gentleman from Switzerland writes about taking a trip to Vancouver, Canada, and falling hard for a girl from Brazil. After a few weeks, she had to return to Brazil, and I had to return to Switzerland heartbroken. Being Swiss, I liked watches, so in addition to the watch on my left wrist showing the local Swiss time, I put another watch on my right wrist showing her Brazilian time. After a while, I got used to wearing 2 watches, and I kept doing so. I was always wearing them, when swimming, sleeping, pretty much all the time. It became a reminder that people in various places in the world had also taken a place in my heart. One day the watch broke down. I took it off, but I couldn't fall asleep that night, so I put it back on again and fell asleep. Hence, I kept wearing the broken watch, and it slowly continued to disintegrate. My friends were always after me to get rid of it. Girls I met would also learn of the story. Some were intrigued, but others weren't amused. I kept wearing it anyway. It had grown on me. I'm sending the museum
Literally.
this watch that has now accompanied me for 15 years as a sign that even when a love story ends, we can continue to draw happiness and beautiful memories from it and give it new meaning over time. Oh, yes, and through social media, I did reconnect with a girl from Brazil. She's happily married now, but I'm happy that our paths crossed in 2002. So that was a nice story, the broken watch.
Now, a woman wrote that her husband of 31 years bought a stylish new pair of boots for himself to impress his mistress. She writes, quote, the affair was discovered when he fell asleep in a drunken stupor onto the bed, wearing said boots, iPad open, showing their lascivious wicker chats. After reading his chats and watching a video of his showing off the boots to Violet, I proceeded to remove the boots from his feet, place them into one of my shoe boxes, and put it high into the closet. The next day, when he asked about the boots, I feigned no knowledge of them and that I didn't know what in the world he was talking about. They were now my secret to keep, locked up nevermore to impress. I'd love to write a song about them, but Nancy Sinatra beat me to it. For now, the boots walk symbolically in the halls of a museum. Still my secret.
Oh, that's a good one. Now this last one's pretty
This
strange.
one's weird. Okay, so finally, this is the last one. A woman from Austria writes, quote, this is so weird. In 1990, my friend, my first great love, had a motorbike accident. Its consequence was severe road rash with several large scabs. The accident shocked me, although nothing serious happened. Since then, I had constant fear that I might lose my dearest one, and for that reason, I kept one of his scabs as it fell off.
What?
With the idea, this is so weird, with the idea that in case I might need to have him cloned. My constant fearfulness eventually led to our breakup. I have kept the scab until today, 27 years long. In the meantime, I have become a biologist. So, okay, so her mind was already there, so I guess. But, however, the desire to clone my partner from that time exists no more. So I guess she donated the scab.
Donated the
Just to
scabs
get-
in a little container, the scab. To the
Oh,
museum.
we
To
hope
help her grow past that.
We hope you've enjoyed this list of strange museums as much as we have.
Phil here reminding you to check out our Facebook and Instagram pages at Remnant Stew Podcast. Drop us an email at staycurious@remnantstew.com just to say hi or let us know about any topics you would like to hear us to cover in an upcoming episode.
Remnant Stew is a part of Rook and Raven Ventures and is created by me, Leah Lamp. Steve Meeker researches and writes each episode that we then host together, with commentary by our audio producer, Philip Sinkfeld. You're welcome. The Oddity du Jour is brought to you by Sam Lamp. Theme music is by Kevin MacLeod and voiceover by Morgan Hughes. Special thanks goes out to Judy Meeker. For a complete list of sources, please see this episode's transcripts. There's a link in the show notes.
Well, now, before you go, please hit the follow button so you won't miss an episode. Head on over to Apple Music and leave us a review. Share Remnant Stew with your friends, your family, that lady with the scab, or whoever else you might find. Until next time, remember to choose to be kind and always stay curious. You can stroll through the Instant Museum. I'm sorry.
The
let me start
Instant
over.
Museum.
Just add water.
Just add water. It pops right up.
You can. Let's say that again. This is too
No,
good.
this
This is too
was
good to mess up.